filming? What's going on? Come on, you just got...
3, 2, 1, whenever.
Okay?
Nice.
Ready? Okay. Ready?
I'm recording it. One more time. Woo!
Okay.
Nice ass. That's it? Nice. One more time? One more time. Four.
Okay.
Sure, helpful.
Okay. Peter Zosky or
Oh, anything is bad.
anything that good?
No,
Or maybe David Frost or something like that?
if you want to pull yourself up,
No,
do it with the arm.
oh yes, thank you. There we go.
Right?
So I thought
Is it plugged in?
it's all plugged in, it's going,
Oh my gracious.
and we'll see what happens. We might take a break after 5 minutes. So, anyways, I thought we would do this for posterity and for the club. Get together and chat a little bit.
Sure.
And I thought it would be fun, maybe to start with you, Fred, because you've probably been the longest standing member or longest coming up here.
1921.
1921.
21 in your case?
Labor Day 21. It's all right. We caught 5 big fish in 15 minutes off the club boathouse that's just been pulled down.
Really?
Yeah, beautiful fish too. Nothing under 2.5 pound bass.
What, up here?
Yeah.
That's the good old days.
And it took us 7 hours to get here, driving
From Ottawa?
from Ottawa, yes. And we left the toll road at Chelsea, and after that it wasn't much of a road.
Really?
But I can remember my father taking rails off the fence and putting them into the ruts so that he could drive the old Chevrolet through it.
Really? And did you get all the way into the club or just to the Gatineau River?
Oh no, we came right up to the club. We got in about 4 or 5 in the afternoon. An old Frank Parker, who was my father's guide, was waiting for us. And he said, Mr. Sherwood, there's a fine school of bass down by the boathouse, and I've got your fishing rods out. So we, my brother and I, we were marched down to the boathouse. Never seen a fishing rod before, and not many fish. And with old Frank's help, we managed to pull these out pretty quickly.
So you had 5 fish in 15 minutes.
5 big fish in 15 minutes. But that was not considered. That was not considered unusual then. That was part of the deal.
Sure is unusual now.
So was this house built in 21 or?
No, we came up because, you know, the greenhouse that the Tones live in, up on the ridge?
Yes.
Franco's
Well, that house was for sale. And my mother was coming up to see if she would like it, so my brother and I and father and mother, we were all in the car. It was an old open, I think it was a Chev or a Dodge. And we came up to have a look at this cottage. My mother had a look at it and she said, no, I don't want a cottage where I have to cross the road to go swimming. So that was that. So we were staying over at the Holbrook's, which is now the Tots, and they used to have a boathouse with 4 guest bedrooms up above, and we were staying in a couple of those bedrooms. And as we were rowing back after having dinner at the club, I think it was Saturday night or Sunday night, Drysdale Holbrook, who was our host, as we rode past this point, which had nothing on it, he said, "Shanley, if Marion doesn't like the cottage on the ridge, I'll sell you an acre here for $500. So the deed was done, and that winter Frank Parker built the cottage. He couldn't read or write, but he did fine, and we've been here ever since.
So Teddy, when did you first come up?
I came up in 1930.
Okay. To the same house that you're in now?
Same cottage, yeah. And that was bought by Uncle Arthur about 1922, I think. But he didn't, for the first few years, we were shipped down to Cape May in New Jersey, and with a nanny, and the parents could enjoy peace and quiet. But when I was 6 years old, we started up here. We lived in a tent alongside the cottage, along with the nanny.
And did you come just about every year thereafter?
Just about, except during the war.
Okay.
I missed a couple years there.
And Dad, you were saying you think 1927 for you?
Yeah, 1927, and the house that Fred refers to, his mother not buying, is the house that my grandfather bought some years later, and so that's where, and that was from 27 onwards, and went for the next 10 years, and in 37 my grandfather died, and that was it. We left, and but it was 10 great years.
And then the Tones bought
They
that
bought
house.
it just this, in fact, the difficulty, you could only, the land was all owned by the club, and you could only sell to another member, so the houses were not too saleable in those days.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
I
Yeah.
think
Archie, how about you?
I came up from my honeymoon in 1950. June.
So
of
you're a
this-
rookie.
I was a rookie, oh yeah. But Barbara had been here since 1925. She was an old timer. But I fell in love with the place as soon as I got here. It had many aspects and memories of Scotland, you know, the same type of lochside scenery, the sharp rising woods and trees. And I enjoyed it immensely and came back every year I could until we moved out west in 57. So we never came any length of time between then and 64. We came back occasionally, but eventually we settled where we are now, and we wouldn't change that for all the rice in China.
So you bought that in the late 60s?
We bought that 25
about-
years ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
74 then.
And of course, the great thing as far as we, Barbara and I, are concerned is that the children all like it. Some kids don't like to go back to cottages, but these children, they like it. It's the same as Dad's and your father and you. They all have a inborn love of this place, and they come back repeatedly, which is a great thing.
Well, that's good to hear.
Oh yeah.
So when would you have first met? I mean, you
Well,
would
we
have
were-
met Teddy and...
We were part of a rat pack that we'd cruise around the ridge here and go into one house until they couldn't stand us, and they'd throw us out, and we'd go bother another family. And it was a great time. Great time to be a kid, really.
So Jackie was amongst those kids?
Jackie was amongst
And
them.
her
Jackie
sister-
Sadler and
Alwyn?
Jackie Jones.
Right, Jackie
Sadler.
Jones.
Yeah. And let's see. Well, we had Sissy Clay, who was a McHenry,
Yes.
and Barney, her
Okay.
brother. And let's see. Well, we had Barbara and the Bettmans, that's correct, and then the Ilsleys.
No, yeah.
Okay.
So, and Junie was sort of the tomboy leader of this group, and she was afraid of nothing at all.
Sorry, who was that?
June Ilsley,
Oh yes. Okay.
who is now June Young.
Correct.
And she instituted the business of sitting on the carriage of the big saw down at the mill as it went back and forth there, slicing off boards. And then she developed the trick when they ran the saw carriage back to take on another log, she would jump off and you'd drop the whole about 10 feet into soft sawdust. And we had poor old Delmar half crazy because there wouldn't be the same count of people on the carriage, sitting on the carriage when it would come back, because some of us had jumped off. So he'd shut down the whole mill and start looking for us. We thought that was great fun.
So how long did the dam stay there and provide, I guess, cut wood and provide electricity?
Well, certainly till just after the war. And they put in the electric generator as well as the mill, and Pemashongan was unable to supply the water. And so they put a diesel engine in to run the mill and just use the water for generating electricity. And then Gaston Ali stepped back one time when he was lubricating the carriage and hit the go handle and sliced his foot off.
Was that what it was?
That's what it was. And so then Rudolph Ali was then the son of Adelmar. He said that's enough, and he shut the whole works down. It wasn't an economic proposition anymore.
Very interesting. What?
But Ted, you can remember, this would be in the early 30s,
Yeah.
they had fields of boards cut and stored.
Oh, the slab wood, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's still there.
There's still, yeah, the slab wood's still there, yeah.
So tell me, if we just, I'm curious if we, memories from the 20s, I guess, Fred, you've got the longest standing memory of activities up here. Is there anything in particular other than the fish catching in 15 minutes?
Well, fish seemed to be the big thing in those days.
Yes.
Everybody had fish at least once a day, and every time anybody went down the lake fishing, they would fish before lunch, and they would expect to catch fish for lunch so that they wouldn't have to go to the sort of hardtack of pork and beans, which they always carried as an emergency. But I never personally heard of anybody having to have pork and beans. They always had fish for lunch. And then they'd go and fish in the afternoon, and that's what it was. People came here to fish, and there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I can remember being taken out on the old logging roads here. There's a whole network of them. And we were taken up to show us where all these old roads went. They're still there. And over to the cave. And remember there was a forest fire just over beside the cave. That's where the loon nest is now. And every night they would have the fire pretty well put out, the rangers would. And it would grow up again during the night, and people always thought that somebody was going in and starting it up because there was no work at that time, and this was good pay.
Oh, I see.
And we were fascinated to go over because the rangers came by canoe, and they had a little gasoline pump in the canoe, and they'd pull the whole thing up and put it on the beach and start the pump up, and they would pump the water up the hill a certain distance to where they'd have another basin or canvas tank, and they would put water into that, and they would either fill their hand pumps from that, or they'd use that as a staging point, and when that was filled, they'd take another pump and pump it up another 300 feet or whatever the height was. They had great long hoses, about 2 inch, and they would take the bark off the tree as it passed, so to speak. Tremendous thing.
The people who are around here, the Blairs and the Alleys, and I guess everybody else, was it just subsistence living?
Well, I remember particularly the ones who were here. There was old Amy Ali, and there was Frank Parker, and Baptiste Mujour, and then there was Pat Blah and his brother Gideon, and they had both been to the war. They were the elite, and tremendously strong. I can remember, I think it was Gideon, picking up a great log down there and just putting it on his shoulder and taking it along and throwing it into the woods.
When you say the war, you're talking about the First World War?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And Mom spoke to Pat one time, Pat Blah, well, must have been great in Paris and that. And his attitude was the loneliest place in the world. So it just shows with I mean, 31 was activity and family, and over there you just don't know a soul.
Interesting. So that was good enough. This was good enough for him up here.
Well, that, and he knew the people, and he
Right.
got over to Paris, and what was he?
It was a big city, and a big city goes well.
No, absolutely.
How about, let's see, there was Ojalon Carroll, that Mr. Smith,
Yeah, Barbara.
and
Edmond?
Edmond Blah, yeah.
Well, Leon and Edmond were twins.
They were twins, that's
Right.
right. They used to do the clog dances together, didn't they?
I don't know, but I went one time with Leon to his house in a Ford Model T,
Oh,
and we went up your road, and it seemed to go forever. I never realized that was the Caron
oh, the
Pointer.
Carroll Farm, yeah.
Oh,
That's right.
Is that out on the Pemashongan Point?
That's
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Pemashongan.
right. Down past Southwest.
It was a long distance.
I remember walking down there when we were pretty young, and they kept saying, well, it's just over the next hill. Boy, I was tired when we got there, but I remember the farm, and I was absolutely fascinated. They had a fly trap, and the flies would get into this trap, and they would buzz and buzz and buzz until they died. And there was a layer of flies that high in the bottom of the trap, and the rest of the trap was about that high. I'd never seen anything like that before, and I inquired as to what it was all about, and they somehow or other converted the flies into glue. I don't know how, but anyway.
Can we take a break for just a second? I just want to check.
This was only a little, and the flies attract the other flies from the smell. And she was saying that the stand was quite full at the bottom, but the way you're describing is much bigger than
Well, you know, when you're 10 years old, things look different to what they do when you're a little older. Another thing that happened in the 20s, we built our boathouse then. And this was wonderful because we could sleep 4 boys up above, and you had all the windows and doors open, so it was nice and cool. And in the morning you got up and just jumped off the balcony and into the water, and
So
it was a very pleasant life.
the boathouse is quite unchanged from when it was first built.
Outside there's nothing to see that's changed.
Yes.
Inside they sheeted in the inside during the war.
Get stoned?
No, just about.
Oh,
No, I'm fine. No,
I'm
yeah.
sorry about that.
No, nothing happened.
I've got some spray here if you want it.
Don't worry.
I'm not sure where it is, the nest, but we knocked off a lot yesterday.
Oh. I was always intrigued with the mill. Anything mechanical was
Oh,
appealed
yes.
for me since I was a boy. And I spent a lot of time down there and noticed that there were great backs of the slabs that were cut.
Yeah.
Cedar. And they would be 14 feet long, perhaps 2.5 inches at one end, tapered down to 0 at the end. Well, I got it into my head I could use them, and I brought them back up to the Smith place, peeled them, and I made beautiful picnic tables out of them, and benches for the kids, and benches for adults. And I wrote it all up, and the first money I ever made writing, I sent it to Women's Day with pictures, and they gave me $25 or $35 or something. I'd made money out of it.
You've never looked back since, have you,
No,
Archie?
I've still got the benches at home. The table was rotted over the years, but it was all made up in here. The first time I ever saw Teddy, I'd been up here for a weekend, I think, in my holidays. Barbara's up here with Alexander, Ross, and I'd gone down to Ottawa to the office for a day or something, and I came back in the train, and Teddy here, had driven in with Barbara to meet him. That's the first time I met Teddy.
So that would have been early 50s?
51 or 52,
Yeah.
53.
How long did they run the passenger service up to Maniwaki?
Oh, up until the 70s.
70s, yes. And
Okay.
the freight ran for a year or two beyond that.
And now it's all a bicycle trailer.
That's right, it stopped.
Ski-Doo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a great ride.
How long would that take from Ottawa once you... would it go from the main railway station or the
Yeah.
old railway station?
Yeah,
It
you're
came right up 2.5 hours. But it stopped in the summer and threw newspapers out, or greetings out to all these cottages up by Larimac and all these little riverside places. Great to come on that train, see the camera and he'd say, "Hi Joe, what have you got for tonight?" He would throw something and it staggered on up the way. Teddy and I got involved in projects at his house. His mother thought it'd be a good idea to re-roof that cottage on us. So we go into town and we buy roofing and we put it on, we nail it on. We get up to the very top near the chimney and there's a wasp nest inside the
Chimney?
roof.
Inside the roof?
And every time you banged them, bloody wasps came out. So, in the end, we couldn't stand it any longer. We got the vacuum cleaner. And I held it at the mouth of the nest. You drive a nail and up the watch. You hear them go down, that you all down into the bag. And we filled that with DDT
Yes.
in the late afternoon, blew them out. But that cured. It's a
Interesting.
dramatic way to get out of
It
there.
sure is.
Sure. And Ted's mother was very helpful. The bathroom window went by as we were roofing, and she would open the window and pass beer out. And I remember sliding down that roofing, and it's very abrasive. Wore the seat out of my blue jeans very quickly.
You were lucky it was only your blue jeans.
Oh, no. Oh, we had great fun up there.
Yeah, that was a great time. We'd known each other for a few years by then.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So what are the major changes that you've seen take place in the, 70 years since, 70,
You know,
78 for Fred and...
Fred would, well, the ones I see is the number of proliferation of homes. Well, when I came up with Barbara first in 1950, the last building was the one that Scott has on Bemishan, you know?
Okay,
The one the same style as ours, long.
okay.
There was nothing there beyond that and Knights, which is the bottom of the hill.
The coffin.
Nothing. There was nothing in Shoalhays Bay.
I see.
Now there are 78 in Shoalhays Bay.
78?
Something
Oh yeah, it's chock-a-block
like
with
every 60
cottages.
feet. I would say that's the biggest change. Then up the lake, the same thing. There are homes up there,
At the far end.
but they don't crowd you out the way the ones down there do.
Okay.
But I noticed it was a fishing club, and every week or two there was another group of fishermen from mostly Americans coming in, and it's changed since I've been a member from a fishing club to a residential club.
Pretty much a cottagers association.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
It,
Well, I remember there was the Grum and Goose that used to come in, and there was a service out of Ottawa that you could take.
Laurentian Air Service.
Yeah.
That was run by my cousin, Barney McLaren.
Yeah.
And how long did that run?
Oh, that
It's still
ran
running.
for about 15 years. The first flight I ever had was in his Waco, and he had to deliver a message over to Blue Sea, and Barnett and Mary McLaren were staying with us. And so Dad made arrangement that John and I could fly over
Oh no.
to Blue Sea with Barnett and deliver this message.
Big deal.
And that was a pontoon plane?
That
Okay.
was a pontoon plane, yeah.
Okay.
Bi-wing.
Yeah,
Waco.
it was biplane,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
But I think the Grum and Goose is still operating out
No,
on the
it's
west
dead.
coast of Vancouver Island.
Somebody flipped it, Archie.
Did they?
Yeah, it was sold to some outfit out in Vancouver, and they had it for a year or two. That was Governor Lehman of New York. That was his
That was
aircraft
his, yes.
originally. And after the war, it was sold to the U.S. government for $1, and then it was passed up to Canada from the U.S. And Barnett bought it from, I don't know.
Somebody.
Well, from War Assets.
More
he said.
assets.
And,
Yeah,
and,
well,
and,
that's probably.
I understand they were fitting some of these planes out. The Harriman, I think, had a Goose that he turned over to the.
Well, that's
Yeah.
it. That was the Grum and Goose that
That-
Barnett had.
Was it? And then they offered it back, and
He didn't want it.
Didn't want it. It was like 6-7 years later, I guess. So, but it had a fabulous record,
Oh yeah.
and then sank in the Ottawa River in a windstorm.
Did it?
And then they pulled it up and
brought it up.
retrofit.
Yeah,
Retrofit it.
it's supposed to be pulling a plane out today.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a great thrill when Franco and his entourage came in the Goose, you know.
Was that right?
They'd all go down to the front of the boathouses there, and here's the thing comes in. And I've forgotten the pilot's name. He
George Beveridge.
Just, anyway, single-handed, he taxied this thing, and as it glided in, he'd jump off, tie it up himself. It was a one-man business. And Franco, people say, who's he got with him this time, you know? Some celebrity, so great.
Well, he was married to Joan Crawford.
Yeah, but this was after he was with Gene
Wallace.
Gene Wallace.
And that was Pat and
And
Jeff's
Gene was
mom.
up here with the kids usually,
Mhm.
and he come back and he had, I don't know, you remember some of the film stars.
Well, there was the one that's in the club is with. Oh goodness,
He was
he's
a
got
great
fishing
friend
rod.
of his.
Yeah, he just died a few years ago.
Meredith.
Yeah, Burgess Meredith.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right. And there was Gig Young who came up with him.
Oh yeah.
There's a picture of the three of them up at Jeff's house.
And there's a fellow who ran that acting school, called Actors Studio or something.
Mhm.
He came up.
So what other celebrities? I mean, we've got that picture of Neville Chamberlain in the 30s.
Oh yeah.
Who else came up here? With,
Oh,
It's rumored that the African campaign was plotted out at Robinson's Point.
comfort.
really, down where Conrad Lebrun is.
Yeah, it's on Conrad LeBrun's property now.
Which
and
campaign?
The North African campaign. This was the American coming
well,
in.
There was Americans came in, and Brits came in, and there was security all over the place. And they had my brother John was up here at the time, and he said they had planes continuously flying over the area, and nobody would say what was going on there, but they all wrote their names or initials on the inside of the door, and as far as I know, those still exist, but I haven't seen them in years and years and years.
Was this at Conrad's place?
Yeah, well, Robinson's
Captain
Point-
Kirby's Point.
Yeah,
Oh, I know it well.
yeah.
You should keep that door as a souvenir if it exists.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I'm sure it has.
When when the Imperial Conference was on when that photograph with Neville Chamberlain in it was taken, the delegates were all taken on fishing, and the picnic was on Robinson's Point. And Lucy Crowdy, as she was, had married Jock Weir, who later became Lord Weir. But anyway, his father, Lord Weir, was here as a delegate at the conference. But as Lucy and her husband were not delegates, they weren't invited to the picnic. I don't know why, but I was delegated to take them out fishing, and it was raining to start with anyway, but it cleared up later. And I was given strict instructions that I was not to take them to the picnic. I could take them anywhere else, but not there. And Lucy, who, as you will remember, was a lady of some force of character, and she was determined she was going to the picnic. So we compromised at the end. There's a little island just opposite Robinson's Point, and I took them there for lunch, and she wanted to get across to the other side. And it was a very nervous day. I was glad to get them all home again. But I don't know why she wasn't invited, but that, as far as I know, is the first time she was up here, and then later, of course, they moved to Jones House.
And that was 1932, 30.
32 was the conference, yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask a question about Burgerville and all the rumors and everything, and I don't know who's best equipped to answer that, but it's got everybody fascinated.
Burgerville was originally Dr. Mackay's Ottawa. Was he a dentist or
No, I think he was a doctor.
just an MD? Okay, and he built this place, which was a treasure, on about 700 or 800 acres of land he had up there, and he had a boat called the Whisper that had a couple of Model T engines in it, and it was a very regal thing. And as when he passed away, the outfit was sold to the K. Woody Pipe Company. That was the Burgers, and they gussied the place up something terrible. They had I forget, Lockheed Electra, I think it was. They would fly into a field and they created a bouchette. And I remember she had the plane sent to back to New York somewhere, and to get some marble chips to lay down the pathway so they'd be nice and white. And one of the things that Madame Berger recognized was that your mother, Fred, wouldn't go to the party. Everybody was invited to this great blowout. They had Filipino servants and all the, everything. And the honeymoon cottage, which nobody was allowed in, but she just had to show it to everybody. And it had a mirrored bathroom. Do you remember that, Fred?
No, I never heard of that. I was
Okay.
away.
Anyhow,
Anyway,
they
I
had
don't
a
think she would
separate
have
building,
approved.
which only Mr. Berger and Mrs. Berger were supposed to go in. But she took note of the fact that your mother didn't come to the party. And so Madame Berger came in the Whisper, which they had taken out the Model T engines and they put in some Chrysler Marine engines, and it didn't ride at all well. It would sit on its tail and drive along at about a 45-degree angle. And she paid a call on your mother and said, I got to see you sometime up there, and I noticed you weren't at the party. And your mother was very gracious. She said, my dear, when I come up, I shall come up to see you, not to be at a party. It was beautifully put.
I remember the Whisper arriving when it was first launched over by the club boathouses, and it came all the way up from Ottawa on a great big cart. And it had, I was very impressed, it had 4 horses pulling it, you know, 2 teams. And it came up over the hill, and as it came over the hill, it looked like a battleship. It was huge. And then it came down the hill, and they launched it where we launch our boats today.
Really.
But it was a beautiful boat.
It was a lovely boat, wasn't it?
But this
Beautifully
property
finished.
you're talking about, it wasn't on 31. It was on its own lake behind Malone Bay.
Well, it had
Yeah.
2 lakes.
It had 2 lakes.
One was Bass Lake,
Yes.
so called,
Yeah.
and
Malone Lake.
the other is what is it?
Malone?
Help me, somebody.
Malone.
Malone.
Malone Lake, yes. And then when this, after the Burgers had it, it went to a series of hands, and there was something called Pongala Corporation that owned it, and they would bring the girls in by way of Bouchette, and the Johns would come and they'd stand around somewhat ill at ease until the boat came down and got them, and it fell on hard times.
Sounds that way.
But then Underwood bought it, eh?
Underwood Typewriter, yeah, I forgot
Yes.
them. They were in there before the Burgers.
That's right.
Yeah.
After
That's what I was-
Mackay.
Yeah.
And I understand that the Underwood Canada people were not included. They were strictly outsiders.
Oh.
This was an American operation. And so it,
But there was a big landing stage on 31 Mile Lake.
Well, that's where the Whisper was
Yeah.
kept. There used to be a boathouse there.
And
a
great
huge
big
boathouse.
timbers were there until a few years ago. And you went up the hill and into this Mackay property.
Okay, what was this about during the Second World War? There was some rumor of some Nazis or Germans coming into Burgerville, or was that just pure
I
speculation?
think that's hearsay.
Hearsay, okay.
I don't think that, I don't think that ever happened.
My memories of Burgerville are all when it was Dr. Mackay owned it,
Mm-hmm.
because he was a great friend of my father's, and I think he was pretty well off. Anyway, we built a house in Rockcliffe in 1922, and he took a first mortgage on it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was, I think he and my father were quite close. He sort of looked after my father as a young man that he liked. And so we used to go and see him quite often. And I remember he always had lovely cold buttermilk for us. And my father also told me, he said that was Bass Lake. He said, there are bigger bass in there than anybody has ever heard of. Nobody is allowed to fish there.
Really?
Oh.
Malone Lake, I think, was stocked with trout even in those days. But after he died, I don't ever remember going back until well after the war. I didn't see it until, and it certainly had changed by then. Under Dr. Mackay's influence, ownership, it was strictly a farm, but I do remember he had some Pennie Canada geese, which I thought were pretty important.
But Fred, do you remember the little golf course there that when you sank a putt, it would run down a pipe and come out somewhere else, and you had to go find your ball?
I
Lots
don't
of fun.
remember it, no. Was that under Dr. Mackay's aegis?
That was under Dr. Mackay. I was only there once, but all I can remember is this,
Lost your
this
ball,
golf
eh?
course.
Yeah.
Yes.
You used to tell a story about Wong, the Chinaman that worked for Granddaddy Butler.
oh yeah, well he was a Wong. I don't know where Wong originated, but Granddad being in the railway business, I guess he must have been a cook on a train or something. And he was hired, and he was the cook. And stayed around, and he came up to the house practically as soon as the ice went out in the spring, and stayed
here.
till late November maybe, or late and then he'd head to town, but he refused to work for my grandmother. He didn't like women. As far a boss could be a man, but not a woman. And he ran. He bought everything. If we were going to have fish for dinner, he knew what the Rosses had in fish and the Smiths had in fish, and everything. It was open to everyone, kind of. I need fish today. You may need chickens tomorrow.
He kept chickens, yeah.
But you told this story about his refusal to go to Montreal.
Well, that's it. When in the fall, my grandmother would love to have had him being the cook in town, and he just, if he went, he sure as hang would cut himself or something. There'd be an accident, and he couldn't work the next day, and then he'd go. And where he went in the winter, whether he went to Chinatown in Montreal or not, we'd see him at Christmas time, and months later he'd come into my grandfather's office and say it's time to open the cottage, and that was the deal.
But the story about his cutting his thumb off, was that true?
No, not cutting it off.
Oh.
Cutting it.
Steve, we've told this story. It's taken on new meaning.
Lots of tales I've heard about him. Some of them exaggerated or changed. But at night he'd sit at the back of that door.
Yes.
Work in an old flat building and smoke his opium.
Oh, really?
Every day, and he'd smoke opium. But they tell a very good story. He did all the chef work, the cooking up there, and your grandfather, your great grandfather, was having a party, very crowded with people, all having drinks.
Keep going.
He, Mr. Butler said, "Go, quick, another round of drinks." "No, Mr. Butler, supper ready, no more drinks, Mr. Butler." And he stamped his feet, and Mr. Butler knew what he was thinking. "All right, well, bring on the dinner."
But he continued to work for the Tones too after
For
the property
years.
was-
Yes, that's right.
For a long time.
He and I would assume, and he worked for Mr. Tone year round.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Well, he
the-
went to Niagara
Niagara
Falls.
Oh, I
Falls,
see.
yeah.
Stayed there.
Yeah. And so probably there wasn't a woman in the picture
No, no.
as bossing that permitted him to work.
But he made ice cream there, and all these gang up here
Oh,
would know this, and they'd all go down there. And poor Mrs. Butler had prepared all the ice cream stuff, but Wong went and dished it out to everybody.
Well, he'd make extra ice cream just for the kids.
For the kids, and they'd all come around. Lady fingers, he made.
And ladyfingers he made, I remember him putting those out on a sheet of parchment or something.
And then he wandered away, they tell me, across the lake into the woods, and he'd lost overnight, and they could hear him crying and moaning, but there weren't many people around here then. Eventually they found him, but he'd gone astray.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd had a run-in with your grandmother or something.
No, I remember hearing this, and he'd gone out, and it was on that.
Yeah, down with the mill, we'd
Right,
gone to
no.
round onto the other shore.
On your across from you,
That's right, yeah.
and got himself lost
That's
in
right,
that
he'd gone
area.
round and round.
So just coming back to people who owned houses, if you start at the Ridge, the first house, which belongs to Barry Steers now, was owned by, you were saying earlier, P.D. Ross? Or
Yeah.
He was,
Yeah, but way back, my grandfather bought it and found out it had gas lighting, petrified of fire, never spent a night in the house, so put it up for sale. We don't know who bought it next. Then the Rosses bought it, and
Then they eventually sold to Miller Wallace? Is
To
that-
Miller Wallace,
Miller
that's
Wallace,
right.
He was from Ottawa.
No, I was from Ottawa, yeah. Lawyer in Ottawa. Well, he practiced in Hull, but he came from Ottawa. And then Barry Steers
bought it in 1976. And then the Williams house, which belongs to Michael Ryan today.
It was another family from New York City in it when I was a kid, and then about 2 years later, Mr. Smith bought it, and that's
Robin Smith.
when I first met Barbara. She was about 5.
Five.
And then the annex was always, as I know it, the annex, but I don't know, Fred, did you, what?
Well, I was where did I read somewhere? It was a cottage they bought it as an annex for ladies,
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
because they
Or
had no
families.
place to stay.
But they're pretty much that. Oh, you never.
I think it's been it was an annex ever since I can remember.
Okay.
But you must remember, I knew very little about the ridge when I was young. I never got that far. You know? That was the other lake.
Yeah, that's right.
Later on, we started paddling on the other lake and picnicking and exploring. But as children, I don't remember much about the ridge.
But Francis Toon bought that.
That's right.
Sometime,
Oh yeah, he bought that.
And
Oh, yeah.
the annex is where Bill Atkins and Rusty
That's
Young
right.
are today.
That's where the gang that came with the goose, that's where they lived.
Would hang out. Yeah.
5, 6 of them.
But
And eat at the club.
in the 20s, people could rent it. I remember there was a family, the Norths, I don't know whether you remember
Oh, yeah.
them. But they rented it for 1 year, and I think the next year they took what was then the Hadley Island. So there was quite a lot of renting around.
Well, that place was originally built by the McLaren plant.
Yeah.
And there's entries in the logbook at the turn of the century of a whole bunch of McLarens that were settling there. And at that time it was called, they called it Hilltop House. And it was taken over by the club. I guess McLaren either sold it or gave it to the club. And I don't know the history beyond that.
And the next house was the Richies. He was, I think, I would say from the southern states. I looked in the book and his name appears in New York City. But they would come up. He was an old man then when, and they had a colored maid that they'd bring up. And they had a single cylinder St. Lawrence
St.
engine
Lawrence.
on Pemashonga, and a man with a hat, and I can't,
Well, that was a Danny Dimwit hat, wasn't it? It was a felt hat that was
Yeah,
then
right.
pulled over a baseball, a
and-
bat.
he
until it stretched.
was their guy.
Yeah.
And then they cut the cut from the back of their house right down to
Oh, they
the
did
water.
that. Remember it.
You can hardly see it today. Look,
That's right, it's
But
barely.
it's still there.
It's still there.
Mind you, it was cut out after that.
Yes.
Yes, I remember that too. I remember that 1 year.
Yeah, when you were here.
Yeah, that was the 60s. And then your house, Teddy. Well, let's come back after the Richies.
Well, after the Richies came the Bettmans. Mr. Bettman. Mr. Bettman was a very old member of the club. I mean, one of the old. And he was also a member of a club down the lake called the Coopers. And I think he was the youngest member with an older group. And he spent time, most of the time, fishing at Coopers. And then, I guess this house came available, and he bought it and fixed it up, put that front veranda on it, and then his family came up, and this is 1934, and there was, what was her name? Peggy,
Peggy and Ronnie.
Peggy and Ronnie Bettman, and they stayed for many
Many years, yeah. There were good people. Ronnie, Peggy and Marion was Ronnie,
Right,
Mm.
okay.
to distinguish her from her mother, who was Marion. And we used to, as I say, we torment the owners of one house and then get chased out and go to another house and play sardines and all kinds of things, hide and seek, when we were youngsters. And then Wong would, he'd make about 3 freezers of ice cream. You'd see him cranking away, and he would call out, "Nellie Lou, Joey, ice cream, ice cream," and we'd all come tearing down. And he had his own cones that he made himself.
Did he?
Yeah, he made everything, and he would give us each a great big ice cream cone to enjoy.
Now, we nearly bought that place. When Beckman died, Mrs. Beckman came every 1 year or 2 years. And she decided she didn't want to do that. And she offered it to us for $10,000. It was the time of the uprising in Quebec. Things were getting hot, and, Quebec for Quebec, and feet stamping, and get out, we can't use the lake. And I got a wee bit alarmed of buying property in Quebec at that very time. And I let it go, and you had a chance to buy it too.
Right.
And neither of us bought it. I didn't care for it because like your mother, was so far from the water.
Yeah.
The hell. And by the time you got down there, you didn't want to swim. When you had swum, it was so cold. So we didn't buy it. But then it went into the,
Tone family.
yeah, but through, Dusty had
Well,
different
hers
names.
was-
She bought it for her son,
That's right.
and,
Yeah.
and he came once, and I think disliked the place. And
Yeah.
Didn't Dusty, wasn't she married to Franco's brother?
Jerry.
Yeah,
And they had a place at Patonga over on Windfall,
that's
Yeah.
right.
on the west
That's
side
right.
of Gracefield.
She had a sister. She was up here one summer, and she had a sister who'd been kidnapped for
In
a
Mi-
$1 million ransom.
in Minnesota or something.
Yeah, there was great coming and going back and forth, and wringing of hands and tears. Nobody knew what had happened to her, but they found her eventually, tied to a tree, and got her out. I don't know if they paid the money. I really don't know, but it was quite a cause célèbre at the time.
And then the next house was your house, Teddy?
It was our
Oh.
house, yeah, which my Uncle Arthur bought in 1922. And he brought his sister up. He was a semi-invalid, and there was no place for her to stay at the time. So she stayed with the Allies, but she had also lived in France. And she knew about when the bed, each leg of the bed was sitting in a can of kerosene. She knew what that meant. And the next day, when she walked up to the club to have breakfast, her hands were all bitten. And apparently there was something in the bed beside her and chewing away on her hands. And that was why the kerosene.
Bed buggers.
Yeah,
Oh,
bed
really?
bugs, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
And anyhow, the people owned, the lords owned the house, and they used to have, their boathouse was your original house. And they had a steamboat, and it had a very high center of gravity and used to turn turtle on occasion. And so people would lay bets each time this thing went out there. They'd get the boiler going and get a head of steam on it. And there would be bets as to whether the thing would turn turtle or not. And it apparently did enough times there. And then when Uncle Arthur bought this, the Grants bought the boathouse and built the original cottage, which was like a dollhouse.
That's right. So that would have been early 20s as well.
That
Yeah.
would- yeah, yeah.
Very interesting.
And they used to have a diving board from the second floor, and the boys would dive off into the lake from that.
We
So
inherited
they
that.
don't
It was the
Grant?
highest high dive we had around.
Yeah, Mrs. Grant.
I can remember Malcolm would sometimes be left up here alone
Oh,
and in the cottage, and we would wake up in the morning and we wanted to wake him up too to go swimming, and we would fire a couple of rounds from the air gun across, and you'd see Malcolm's face come up at the window like this and down again.
oh no! Oh, dear, dear, dear.
Yeah, that was a funny place. We bought it in, I think it was 77 when we bought it. We started using it in 72.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And the boats would go by and the whole house would shake.
Oh,
It had a wire around it to keep it
That's
from
right.
falling into the lake.
Yeah, it was
But the
time.
Browns put the wire around it.
Is that right?
Yeah, that was
Well, do you remember Ted, Fred, after Ted's house went up, there was another house which Dr. Drury built.
Yeah.
And he built a boathouse right down here.
I remember it
And a
well.
fire in the middle of the night.
No, it wasn't the middle of the night, it was just at supper time.
Was it?
Yeah, because we were sitting down to supper here, and it must have been a Sunday or a Saturday night, I don't know which. But anyway, that was all swamp where the parking lot is now. And he built a sort of causeway that you walked out on, you know, on cedar posts.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was, the boathouse was there, and
But not touching the other single, was it?
Just a single boat.
Yeah.
yeah, it was a single boathouse. Well, there was nothing else to touch. It was in the middle, just on the edge of
Yeah.
the bulrushes. And anyway, suddenly somebody said, "There's a fire," and we looked out, and everything was as dry as tinder. And we came out here, and you could see the thing going perfectly straight up in the air like that. It was really
Yeah, the
scary.
new boat would be in there.
Brand new.
Yeah, and they think it must have been a kapok cushion that had been smoldering because they'd been out that day. The gas tank was empty, fortunately.
No other damage, just that one boathouse.
That
That's
was
right.
all, yeah.
And the boat.
Oh, and there was one other thing too. Now, Rosie Jones, that's Jackie Sadler's mother, who was staying here. She was in our guest room. And she and my mama said, you know, if we're going to get burnt out and we have to spend the night in the woods, we better have some blankets and things. So they took the blankets out and they laid them along just down here under the beside the railing here, but on the ground, so that if we had to get out quickly, we could pick them up and run. In the meantime, my brother and I, we had a hand pump here, and we pumped water on the roof of the boathouse, and then we came up here and we pumped water on the roof of this house. And of course, it all ran down onto the eiderdowns and blankets. It was a wet night anyway, whichever way it looked at. But I remember very clearly.
The last house we talked about, the Drury's house, that
Yeah.
was ended up being the Ilsley's house.
Yeah.
And then Dusty bought it after that.
But then when did it pass from the Drurys to the Ilsleys?
Well, it didn't pass from the Drurys
No.
directly to the
I see.
Ilseys. There was a Thompson family had it.
In between, right?
And they had an American Indian by the name of Michael Kishigo. And he was enormously strong. And I remember they had a Chris Craft. And it had a V8 engine in it. And the engine had to come out for some repairs. And so they all went off to get a chain fall to haul this engine out. When they came back, here was the engine sitting on the dockside, and Mike Kishigo had just picked it up and
Oh, come on.
set it over. He used to crush light bulbs when he screwed them in. They would pop in his
Oh,
hand.
dear. Dear, dear.
So, they were a very colorful family, and they used to party a lot. They used to have a lot of ridge parties of, we'd have, what do you call it when you have clues that give you the next place and so on and so forth.
Scavenger hunt?
Scavenger.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't a
Treasure?
scavenger hunt.
Treasure.
Treasure hunt, that's it.
But all of them boys in that family all had quite elaborate cars of their
Oh
own.
yeah, they were
And
well to do.
I mean, money was no object then, and poor old Mr. Thompson, he died at the beginning of the war, and they lost everything in his investments, and it ended up his wife wanted to dispose of the property.
It went for a song. Ilsley bought it for a song.
Yeah, he got it for
Look.
very little.
$1,200 or something.
But the Thompsons had the Tomes cottage at one time.
Oh,
think
They may have rented it for a summer. I
They
don't
may
know.
have.
But I do remember going to a wing ding there. I think the family were all away. It
oh boy.
was, yes, as you say. Chili Thompson was one of them, and there was an older one.
There's
One of-
Chilton and Dabney.
Yeah, that's right.
Good for you, Ted.
I don't know why. Those names
They
come
weren't
to
the
mind.
Thompson, Raymond, and Woolridge. They weren't the
I don't
TRW?
know.
the auto parts.
I don't know. That could be.
TRW.
Yeah.
Whatever they.
But Thompson Products was a predecessor of TRW.
Yeah, and they had a boathouse. They had boats down in here.
Well, they were ardent members of the club,
Yeah.
Yes,
the
TRW,
Thompson product,
yeah.
then
Yeah.
TRW.
So there might have been a connection.
But
Yeah.
Oh, there was. I know there
Getting
was,
back
yeah.
to Ted's house was
Yes.
one of the first houses on there. I was led to believe it was the manager who looked after the horse barns in the logging time. That this was the summer camp for the horses
They'd rest the horses
on the
for
on the
summertime.
ridge. And
Oh,
I
really?
think the manager, it's a well-built place, Ted's. I think he lived there. And we know from photographs that 1904 that house was up.
Oh yeah. Well, we have
Was
a
it?
picture when it was called Pemashongan Lodge,
That's right.
and this would be before the Lords had it, and by the clothing of the sports you could see on the porch. This was a photograph that old Arthur Scarf took, because Gordon Scarf has the original, and I believe in the Centennial book they used that.
I think it was about 1904.
It shows the main clubhouse with the old roof, the flat roof
Yeah.
it had on
And
it.
it's superimposed, so you stuck inside.
Yeah, that's right.
And it calls it the fish club or something.
Just coming back, you said then the Ilsleys bought the place, and I remember meeting Mr. Ilsley when I came up in the early '60s.
Oh yeah.